dust on my name and hands. Preacher said, son, stay straight, but he never did understand. Sheriff took my daddy's land for a deal that turned to dirt. So I took my pride and my 45 and I gave back what he earned. Yeah, I broke the law, but the law broke first. It turned his back when the good folks heard. You can call me sinner, you can call me cursed, but I broke the law, 'cause the law broke first. Judge in town wore a Sunday smile, but he drank with the devil at night. Told me, boy, you can't win that fight, but I've been wrong and right. I lit a match to the courthouse steps, watch the truth go up in flame. Sometimes you gotta make your stand, even when they call your name. Yeah, I broke the law, but the law broke first. It turned its back when the good folks heard. You can call me sinner, you can call me cursed, but I broke the law, 'cause the law broke first. Now I ain't no hero, saint, but I know damn well what justice ain't. If the law won't bleed for the people's word, then it ain't worth the paper it's written on, sir. Yeah, I broke the law, but the law broke first. But the law broke first. You stole my faith and left me worse. You can call me wanted, I've seen worse, 'cause I broke the law when the law broke first. I broke the law, 'cause the law broke first. The law.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me.
Turn on your mind now, tune into the feed. We're planting digital flowers from a single tiny seed. Yeah, power to the collective in the data and the soul. The hive mind's getting louder, finding voice and control. Late night in Moscow, where nothing
best in town.
What is going on, Hive? I hope that everybody's having an awesome morning and early afternoon. Welcome to the Hive Mind. I'm your host, Birdie. I typically go live weeknights at 7 p.m. Central, but today I'm having to stream a little bit early. Right now it's 11 a.m. Central, and we like to think past the headlines in here. So I know sometimes streaming at different times than normal opens this up to maybe a little bit different algorithm and people that maybe might not be aware of what the Hive is. And we're going to be discussing the Idaho 4 case. And if you're somebody that thinks you know the case because you've watched the Amazon documentary, you've watched the new Netflix documentary, maybe you've read a few books outside of Broken Plea or the Maddie Mogan guest theory book, you're in for probably an eye-opener of a stream, because we don't just like to clap along and believe everything that the news tells us about the Idaho 4 case. Specifically, how it is nothing but a bunch of narrative. And anyways, I guess that's your warning. You can say whatever you want in the chat, though. If you disagree, go ahead, as long as you're not trolling, spamming, or threatening. I have the best mods on YouTube, being Discord Dawn, formerly known as Beck, the UFO Dog, and Luna Bliss. They'll give you enough leash to hang yourself. And as you all are filing in, please go ahead, do all the things, hit like, hit subscribe. We have a lot to talk about today, so I'm going to kind of cruise on through these. If you'd like to screenshot this, so when the live concludes, all you got to do is go to your Photos app, tap on the QR code. That will bring up all of the Hive's links. So to bring you to our merch store, the Spotify playlist, my TikTok, as well as our Discord, which I'd highly recommend you join. Discord's free. This stream is free. But if you would like to support the stream financially and have access to the emojis and the loyalty badges next to your name, as well as on Saturdays, I do a Hive Plus War Room. There will be one this Saturday, 11 a.m. The chat is locked down just for the Hive Plus members. Everybody can still watch it. However, on Saturdays, I do shut down the chat. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot less presentation, a lot more collaboration. And so, whoops, I forgot to change that from a couple of weeks ago. But today we're going to be talking about the cleanup and how. 8 hours. And the reason why I feel like this becomes relevant again is because of the mainstream media and the Netflix documentary. The cleanup is obviously a huge deal. They bring up how there's nothing in the living room, and it's normal. There's no traces outside of it except for some latent footprint. I'd be curious how many people believe the mainstream narrative around Brian Koberger, even know that there's blood on the ping pong table. Whose blood is it? Is it Xana's? Is it Kaylee's? How many people know that there's blood all over the stairwell with unknown male DNA? How about a White Claw box that's set on top of a blood stain on the handrail, also leading down towards where Dylan and Bethany were hanging out? Because once you bring the cleanup into the mainstream narrative, if you are believing that it is Brian Koberger, who there is a thud, the thud at 417, and Murphy barking, and then you see the white car speed away, it's like 4 minutes. And then you look at the crime scene, and there's blood on the ping pong table, blood on the half wall, blood on the handrail, a latent bloody print that was cleaned up outside of Dylan's door, a bloody fingerprint by the backsliding door. Well, then you must believe, if Brian left that quickly and Brian did this by himself, you must believe that maybe the roommates were helping out Brian, right? Maybe Dylan and Bethany know Brian because they waited 8 hours then. See, it's such, you have to do so many mental gymnastics to accept the official story on the Idaho 4. And if nothing else, I probably underestimated how many people would still believe the official story at this point. I'm not going to get caught up on what Netflix showed or didn't show, or what Amazon showed and what they didn't show. And you can apply that to any of the mainstream narrative productions, whether it's a book or some sort of movie or docuseries, right? I underestimated how many people would still believe that, given the fact that all of these court documents come out, all of the testing, all of the police reports, all of the FOIA interviews, all of the FOIA body cam, all of the FOIA security footage. And it's like mind-blowing to me. And so today, I just want to address the fact that Ethan had a clump of hair in his hand, which we've discussed, but the cleanup, Ethan's clump of hair in the hand, or I'm sorry, the clump of hair in Ethan's hand and the cleanup, and Brian Koberger speeding away in 4 minutes does not make any sense. You can also add into that another contradiction. If they were killed in their sleep and Brian Koberger snuck up on them, how does a clump of hair end up in Ethan's hand? Why do they only test one hair from it? And so I have a ton of questions that I think will be very productive to ask. Questions that ideally will allow people who believe the mainstream media and their narrative about this case to wake up. Because for the people that are in the quote unquote pro burger community, which is just another divide and conquer tactic that's been used forever, for the people that aren't awake to that yet, will clearly show what they're doing by giving people labels. But for the people that are in the Idaho 4 truth community, the people that are labeled pro burgers just for not believing everything that they're told, and then also obvious things that don't make any sense, you can go ahead, you can attack us, you can call us names, whatever it is. But we need to realize in this community, we need more people that, if nothing else, they don't buy it. They don't buy the official story. And these are also very important questions. I think it's going to be useful for us to ask them to ourselves. I'll throw some answers up onto the screen, and we'll have it, I guess you could say, like an open discussion about it. Because when you include all of that, all of those things and all of the questions I'm about to ask, there's one thing that comes out of that, and that's that the state's narrative is like a moth to a flame. It doesn't exist. It can exist. But the theory that starts to emerge is this was done by more than one person. It took way longer than the official timeline. There's more people that know about this, and they're not in prison. So it's a super serious topic. But what makes it unserious is that for as much as they want to say we're throwing out wild and crazy conspiracy theories, dude, the mental gymnastics some people are doing to try and say that it's Brian Koberger and Brian Koberger alone is almost more of a conspiracy than almost any other theory that I've heard at this point. And I've heard a lot of crazy theories, but to say that one person could do this, not have a scratch on him in 4 minutes, clean up a crime scene and have no motive, not have to talk in court, and tell us how they did it, why they did it, where's the murder weapon, why those victims, how did he know which rooms they were in, how did he know when they were home? That's a massive deal that so many people will look at their television or they'll watch a docuseries and they'll just say, oh, he did it, that's good enough for me, and not understand the behind the doors pressure that any individual can be under when maybe their lawyers don't believe in them, maybe their family doesn't believe them, their friends have all abandoned them, and they have the pressure of the court on them saying, take the legal victory. Take the legal victory and admit to capital murder. Or go in front of a jury that has clearly been poisoned at this point, hypothetically, but literally in a sense of the mainstream media has then done nothing but call you an incel, stalking loser who hates women and wanted to see how smart you were because of your PhD studies to see if you could outsmart the police and get away with it. And it's been 4 years and it hasn't changed. How many documents did you guys see in the Netflix series? How many have been released? Purposeful avoidment. They're purposefully avoiding it at this point. And so, again, that's what we're going to be diving into. I want to say what's up to everybody. Usually these earlier streams are a little bit smaller of a chat, which is always great. See a lot of familiar faces in here. What's up, UK Kaylee? Pieces of April, 0 Fs given. Sincerely, Gen X. Accomplished Day. Peanut Butter M&Ms. Queen of Rico, indeed. 4 a.m. said, when I pled guilty, the judge made me say out loud what I did. CB from Philly. What up, UFO dog? Bex Tats. Good to see you. Laura, how are you doing today? Bunny Lover. Regina. Trail Girl. JFC 4566. High Knee Titties. Crazy Bird Lady. Peggy Low Big, how are you doing? Billy Girl. Can't redact the Hive. Miss Kim. Splendid Melancholy. Pop and Switch. Sleuther Dare said, I'm so tired of hearing different things from the same person depending on who they are being interviewed by. Oh, yes. Mr. Cyray. Jess to the Nest said, I oddly think Netflix made a few people rethink this. I've been seeing videos about people saying how they don't think it's possible anymore, the narrative. How do I answer that? How do I respond to that? Because while I see your point and I don't disagree, because I've seen some comments too that people are like, that's a little bit weird. I just feel like there's enough out there at this point that could have made it no question on a massive scale. Does that make sense? I feel like there was an opportunity, especially given the director, the producer's other work. There was just an opportunity with how much is out there to shatter this entire narrative. What's up, Sean? Sherry Garrison. Namastella. Danger Zone. Good to see you, man. Hive Mind Mermaid said, waiting 8 hours is it for me. Once I got into it, red flags everywhere. The Yessie interview was my aha. Dylan wasn't feeling it, but was so drunk. Blah, 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 blah. Complete BS. Jasper the Jester. Jessica. What's up, Luna? Good to see you. The Cryptid Sleeps. Thank you, Pinto Sack, for the jewels. Saying stay hydrated. K Miller, welcome to Hive Plus. Lou Stone said, I think it happened at 2 a.m., 10 hours for cleanup, cars dropping and taking things from scene like cleaning stuff. Goonies win, 550 jewels. Thank you so much. I have an impromptu question of the day for you all. Okay? And hopefully this makes sense how I ask it. There seems to be two prongs as far as an offensive that people like us, if you are one that believes that this is completely wrong and that it's not the right person in prison, there seems to be a two-prong offensive attack that we are split between at times. And so my question is this. Is it more effective to first show that Brian Kohberger could not have committed this crime and only focus on that? Or is it more important to continue to look at security footage, FOIA interviews, FOIA body cam, and other FOIA reports or things found online and theorize as to what could have happened? Or do you do both simultaneously? And I've had that debate in my own mind a couple of times. Because in our minds, we're like, this is so obvious it's not Brian Kohberger, but who knows what's going to happen? It's the Idaho 4 case. Anything happens for many reasons. I understand both are important, but if you had to pick one, should be the question. If you had to pick one or the other, because I guess both is an obvious answer. So let's just, for the sake of this thought experiment, let's just take the answer of both out. If you had to pick one or the other, are you going to first prove that Brian Kohberger didn't do it, or are you going to first prove what you believe actually happened with a theory? And I'll throw some answers up on the board now because everybody was saying both. Stinkapoot said, I think we need to prove he couldn't have done it first. So then the only thing left to do is figure out what actually did happen. Carrie J saying Brian didn't do it first. Alicia said the same thing. Cryptid Sleep said, if I had to pick number 2, so that would be more of the theory. UFO Dog agreed with that, saying prove what happened. Mum Red said prove he didn't do it. Welcome to Hive Plus, Baby Cakes. Thank you so much. Red Hottie said that he didn't do it. Kerry Scott said prove that Brian didn't do it first. Same with Brad Harris. Laura K. I like the way you think, saying if we prove what actually happened, thus it would prove Brian didn't do it, therefore his innocence. Cryptid Sleep says, I guess proving he didn't do it is the best. Hannah said, because people are flat out ignoring the facts. So if I had to absolutely pick and choose, I would try to think in terms of maybe you don't win every battle, but you're winning the war as far as an analogy goes. Because right now, a huge piece of this is the resistance that's felt from believing anything outside of the mainstream narrative. There are so many MSNPCs, simps, sheeps, whatever label you want to give them. It has nothing to do with this case as far as like guilt or pro burger. I think that it's just an everyday thing for those type of people personally that just are unable to critically think. I've said in the past, I'm like, if at this point the original narrative doesn't at least make you pause for a split second, your instinct is so poor. I don't want to be mean, but it's so bad, it needs to be studied. What makes you unable to think outside the box, and what makes you trust what people tell you so much? Is it just because it's on a flat screen in your living room? What is it? Pieces of April said, I think there should be a law that if a case isn't solved yet or still in court proceedings, there should be notebooks or movies made about it. Like always have somebody following them around, getting behind the scenes clips of whatever is allowed to be heard publicly. Or I guess if they don't release it publicly, maybe after the fact, then it's different. You'd have to have a lot of trust in people maybe not leaking certain things. Sleuther Dare, well said. Sleuther Dare made the point saying finding out who the actual target was could lead us towards who the real perps were. Big Forehead, Big Dreams says people are too caught up in the minutia of life that they only read the headlines. Facts. Facts. That is a real problem. And it's one that, I mean, I don't know how we fix it. That's just the reality of life at times, you know. People don't know, but they don't know. But for me, it's the people that they have the time to watch these series and they have the time to tell you you're wrong in the comments, but they don't have the time to research things that aren't in that series. And I don't know if that's because it's hard work. I don't know if they're afraid to have their mind changed. I think that that's something that I've also realized is there are many people that exist in the world who are terrified of changing their mind, that once their mind says something functions this way, there's a sense of comfort that comes over them whenever they think about that topic. And if that were to change, the technical term would be cognitive dissonance, but it makes people feel very uncomfortable. And people hate feeling uncomfortable. My advice to you would be get comfortable being uncomfortable, and your mind will be blown at how many things you thought were real that are not, how many things you thought were the truth on how things happened and they didn't. UK Kaylee said, the proof he didn't do it is there. It's been obvious he didn't do it from the start. It's like they've been drip feeding us puzzle pieces, which has just confirmed it for us. Danger Zone said exactly. Cognitive dissonance is off the charts these days as things get more unreasonable. That's what my mom always said, UFO dog. You don't have to have a good memory if you just tell the damn truth. It's a lot easier to remember the truth than it is to remember lies. Lady Speedwell said most people haven't got the guts to have a mind of their own. That's true. That is very true. And I think there's also a lot of people who are afraid to have to come out and say, I was wrong. I was completely wrong, and I refused to look at anything else. And actually it got to a point where I've known I was wrong, and maybe their ego prevented them from saying what they know to be true, but they, for one reason or another, don't say it. Could be because of their following, could be because of their boss. It could apply to so many things in life. You guys get the point. So I have something that I found very interesting, and then I'm going to show you guys after I read what Pop and Switch just said. Thank you so much for the super chat, Pop and Switch. Said, creating an effective and protracted counterattack that will make people question if they are being duped by the various forms of media. Nobody likes being not booped. Boot my dog's nose, but nobody likes being duped. You guys know what that means, right? Where you like tap your dog's nose and you're like, boop. Does anybody else do that? Okay, just to clarify what that meant. Going back to that point, you want to know what I think is one of the hardest parts about being duped is admitting that you were duped. If you got scammed and it took you a very, very long time to figure it out, to have to go back and think to yourself that you were actually, in fact, helping that scam. Some people would have a very hard time admitting that, because then it attacks their own ability or their own talent or their own thought process on things that they fell for. Yeah, Cookie's Corner says it's someone's life, so the blatant refusal to read into different suspects is mortifying. Scary AF. Sean Mulvey said nobody likes admitting when they're wrong. Lady Speedwell said 100%. Aaron said it's because of their ego. True to It said that's a shame. Doc McClendon said, I actually said this too. Create a doc that points out all the red flags for people to look at or raise a question around. Now is the time to educate and challenge the story. That last part about educating and challenging the story is what I really think is going to be very effective right now. I know there are people that have probably wanted to get into this case, and then let's say that they do tune in to here or maybe another channel. We've gotten so granular that it would be hard to be brought up to speed. And I understand people can go watch the replays, and that's why I do the 20-minute quick cuts so that people can catch up more efficiently. But I mean, it's an hour and a half per topic at times, maybe longer. So to Doc McClendon's point about now being the time to educate and challenge the story for the masses, I think that that's a really good idea. But I think we have to be aware of just how long it's been, years, that we've been uncovering every single stone in this. Crazy Bird Lady said, I can almost guarantee all of us in here have been duped at some point, which is why we are all in here and using our critical thinking skills. True. Absolutely true. I think I told you guys a story when I was in the Bahamas with my wife about 6 months ago. I was full on duped, and in a way I kind of knew I was being duped, but I didn't know what to do, so I just agreed to whatever their offer was to have the duping be over. And I think I showed you guys this slot machine. We went to a restaurant that was attached to a casino in the Bahamas, and threw like $200 in there. We were having a drink later at night before bed, and I hit the major jackpot of like $6,000, and the machine malfunctioned. But lucky for me, I had started being like, oh my God, I got it. I took my phone out and I recorded it, and you could see the major jackpot on the screen. And so it took forever. It was like the damn mayor, or the leader of the Bahamas, apparently had to like be on the phone. That's a joke, but it just seemed like this is a huge deal to them that this happened, and they had no idea why. And so it had been like 3 hours. Mrs. Birdie went to bed, and I'm sitting there tired. It's like 1, 2 in the morning at this point, and they offered me $1,000. And so I took the $1,000. I'm like, there's no way. They said they were going to mail me the rest of the money if I waited, and that would potentially be the outcome. And I'm like, okay. Anyways, but yeah, we've all been duped at one point or another. Big forehead, big dreams. That's a hell of a date night. Said I made an entire PowerPoint, Jesus, I can't talk. I made an entire PowerPoint for my boyfriend about this case. Good to see you, Toes. How you doing, man? True, Bunny Lover. Bunny Lover said, Birdie, that's more strong arming than duping. Casinos do that. They don't know what. They don't know why, because they're set that way. Namastala said that happened to me in the Dominican Republic. Jamaica. No, you didn't, UFO dog. You ran from the police in the Bahamas. Feel free to call in tomorrow night and share that story and any body cam that you may or may not have of it. What's that, Namastella? See, Birdie, this is what happens when you go off your schedule. What does that mean? Swag87 said, I'm trying to see the PowerPoint. Pinto Sack said the birdie sign behind me looks like it says Bitsy. Wow, thank you for pointing that out, Pinto Sack. Now I won't be able to look at it ever again the same way that I just was for the last how many years. Next week, you guys will see I have a studio that is being not built, but I guess put together. So next week, it'll look a little bit different. Very excited about that. Okay. All right. Here we go. So I found this to be very interesting. Now, this was shared on X randomly on my FYP page, and I screenshotted it. I didn't get who the person was, so I apologize if you recognize this. But somebody made an example of why one report number matters if you're doing a FOIA request. And I noticed that this was referring to the Idaho 4. And this was something that I felt was important to share nonetheless. And I don't know if this has happened to anybody. So check this out. And it goes to break down, real life example, why one report number matters. A small letter / number mismatch can hide or split related records. So it says the official press log shows the incident as 22M09896, but the MPD homicide update shows it as 22MO9896, substituting the letter O for the 0. And so this may be nothing more than a clerical PDF or OCR issue, but for public records research, it can matter. So a small difference can hide or split related records and impact, keep an eye out documentation. I'm not sure what that means. So search all variations. And this is the examples that they gave at the bottom. And it points us out. So I don't know if you guys want to screenshot this, but I agree with that. One small entry difference can change what records you find. I'd be curious if this has happened to anybody. Now, going back to what I had in the chat before the stream for a poll to start, and that was, did Brian Koberger have a connection to the roommates, being Dylan or Bethany or anybody in the victim's inner circle? Maybe somebody that showed up that next morning, maybe somebody that was interviewed. 82% of people said no, but there were 18% of people that said yes. I'm curious, for the people that said yes, who who Brian Koberger has a connection to. I remember back there was like a League of Legends rumor about gaming together or something. But outside of that, I don't think that they would know each other. And I asked that almost sarcastically in a way, going back to my intro about and why I think it's important to educate people on this topic, but also ask a series of very important and effective questions. And so I'll have a video pulled up here in a second. Just give it a second to load. Okay. G Nice says Brian Koberger is going to be crying on death row now. LMAO. Altruistic Murder said, I think Steve G is involved in the unaliving. Wow. Nemesis in Hades, how are you doing? Okay, so here are some questions I want to talk about. All right. And I'm going to lead into this because one of the things that I tried to do was think back to the narrative over the course of the last few years. And you guys help me out in the chat with this, okay? But I am under the full belief that when we lay it out like this, or I'm going to do my best to lay out in a way that even the most simple-minded simpleton will be able to pause for a second and reflect, that doesn't make sense. Because as I was saying, I'm a believer that the single offender stranger narrative, right? Brian Koberger is a stranger to these people. That was constructed after the fact was only done to close this case. They needed an arrest. They need a name. That's what everybody that's a police officer or works in law enforcement, turn on damn near any true crime show, First 48, whatever name of a show you want to say as an example. How often, or even in the movies, how often do you hear cops say, we have to get an arrest, or there's pressure to get a name? The public needs a name. Public unrest is growing. And so I think that that's why if they didn't have an answer, or if they did have an answer that the public couldn't know about for whatever reason, you could put both of those under the same umbrella and categorize them the same way for this argument here. That's why it had to be a single lone wolf actor that was just believable enough with a massive media push that the masses would believe it, and it would be just good enough and make the public and that community and those universities feel safe enough to return. Oh, thank God. It was only him. It was only him. But there were people that started realizing right away, again, once you put that narrative under just slight scrutiny, it will never survive that. Their story makes sense when you play eerie music. You film the back of the house with just the string lights on in the dark. And you're talking about how this is how he snuck in through the back door. And they just leave out the fact that 4 people being stabbed to death was done that quickly and quietly. I don't want to be, somebody who's having to go to a dark place or say things, but I do question, do you guys realize how violent and brutal a stabbing would be given their injuries that they released with the autopsies? If you just look at it flat on its face, do you realize there's over 150 stab wounds? People are unrecognizable. Skulls are fractured. There's arterial blood spray all over the wall. Xana put up a hell of a fight. And Dylan apparently only heard somebody crying and not in a nice way say, it's okay, I'm here to help you. And Bethany heard a firecracker because they were all asleep. Moving on, they don't talk about how Brian Koberger would have already known the layout of the house, who was living there, what were the social dynamics of that house. How did he know there wouldn't be people over there? There's 5 cars in the driveway at what's known to be a party house. How would he know he would be able to get in? Oh, that's right. The mainstream media, one of the more popular theories in the mainstream media is that because Brian Koberger's phone pinged 23 times leading up to that, and although Murphy did bark, but let's just forget about that for a second because we can hear that clearly on the camera. What Brian was doing those 23 times is in that back hill, Brian was standing in the woods with dog treats. And every time that Murphy would get let out, he was building rapport with the dog. I wish I was making that up. There are people that have been on mainstream media that have been so impressed by their own theory when they said that. And so the dog recognized them. Okay, well, let's learn how phone pings work. There's 2 towers that Brian could have been connecting to, maybe a third, depending on how you want to look at it. And if people don't know this, from a 40,000 foot view, is simple of a way to say it. Just because your phone connected to a tower, they cannot tell you where specifically in that tower, in the tower's coverage, you're at. So Brian Koberger has never done this. He has visual snow, autism, dexterity issues, walks like Frankenstein's awkward nephew, and moved swiftly, quickly, and precisely in a dark house that is made of flimsy building materials. Go watch their house get torn down. One swipe of the boom of the tractor took it out. And there's not even blood dripping off of him from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor to the back window. Nothing in the snow, nothing in his car. But, oh, that's where his OCD comes in, Birdie. Don't you see? Somebody next to him in jail said he was washing his hands a ton. Okay. Well, then, are you going to say that Brian did the cleanup? Because I think that it's important to show people this. And that is this video here. Okay. Many people have seen this video, but I just want to really point a few things out because I think that there's even problems within the Idaho 4 truth community with the 4 a.m. timeline. Because if we're going to stick to what we see on the camera being criminal, that means that certain cars and certain vehicles at certain times have way different intentions than what we're saying. I have said this for quite some time. It does not make sense in my head that this is just the wrong person at this point. We've seen too many things that point to a look over here, not over there type of cover up. And I'll say it. Yeah, it's a cover up. Because why are we to assume that all of the evidence that they say is Brian Koberger, and even if that's not Brian Koberger's car, but let's just say that that car wasn't the murderer. And let's say there was multiple murderers. Why do we think that they're going to show us the actual crime playing out and it's just, oh, it's the wrong person? If there's 2 people or if there's 3 people, that timeline doesn't make sense at all with a cleanup, with how little blood is around, with their wounds. Does that make sense? And I firmly agree with that too, Sleuth. If they expose Brian Koberger's phone, they expose the others that were involved as well. So here is what the Idaho Statesman put out. And again, I'm just shocked that this is still what people stick to. I'm just going to mute that because of copyright potentially. So this is when they're saying that Brian Koberger now is doing these vulture passes, as we know. Okay, actually, this is a good moment. So I obviously I see G Nice's comment, but here's my question or challenge, I guess, to you, G Nice, as far as I'm actually asking you this. So on any of the footage, do we see Brian Koberger inside of that car? Do we see Brian Koberger's license plate? Do we see him walking into the house? And are you positive that that's Brian Koberger's car, or do they just drive similar makes and models? Right, so you don't. And then if he has no connection to the victims and he never followed them and he has no motive, and this is not just Brian Koberger not talking. I mean, you're hearing, I'll play the post-sentencing press conference. You hear them say, we don't have a connection. We don't know why. I understand that it's not just one thing, but it kind of was. It was the DNA on a knife sheath that has no chain of custody, that the FBI broke their own guidelines using like 23andMe databases, and it's a giant secret. Ann Taylor, quote, they don't know how they got to that result. And so if you stack enough circumstantial evidence up to give a theory, but that theory's wrong, what happens then? So G-Nice says, I just think they have the right person, but they're so sloppy. Well, if it's sloppy, there's room for error, right? That there could be another person. And obviously everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I just feel like if that was me, man, and I'm like, you should have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt in general. And I think that that's the big problem is, if nothing else, apply it to other cases, that it shouldn't just be good enough that every single time there's a mechanism in our justice system that could provide clarity, it just disappeared in this case. Which is a bigger issue than the Idaho 4. Gina said, I mean, I definitely am always thinking, like, how didn't he track blood to his car? Especially given the fact that it's 4 minutes and that he cleaned up, and that they say there's evidence of a cleanup with undiluted, or there's liquid diluted that's unknown with the blood in the stairwell and on the beer pong table. Anyway, so I was just curious. I mean, that's what I would say. Like, I agree. I mean, they're saying it's his car. I mean, his car doesn't have fog lights. We see fog lights in other footage near campus. Yeah, maybe Jeff changed his name, but I don't know. I think that those questions are. So, oops, this is a good point. So G-Nice says, I think my problems. Why pick him? So this is actually going to lead me to say something I haven't really said in a long time, but I would not find it a stretch if Brian Koberger was the result of some algorithm. We know with like flock cameras and IGG and AI in general that the consumer models that we see are nothing like what they have available for law enforcement or these three-letter agencies. The NIJ was funding AI predictive criminal behavior at the school that Koberger went to. But if you were to realistically think like, okay, we see a white car on the camera. Is there anybody that's in a 30-mile radius that drives a white car? Okay, now is there a way to somehow access if people purchased a fixed blade weapon in the area and they look for that? And then do they just find a common denominator and they get a list of suspects and they start going through it? You know what I mean? So I could see that happening for sure. And did we just watch the first ever AI criminal investigation fail on its face? Well, I will agree with that. And thank you for the conversation, G Nice. I appreciate that. Eddie said, have you heard of Jonah Chapin from Spokane? I have. And Aaron Riley and I have been working on that, which we need to get on at, Aaron, probably after this weekend, after I get moved. But yes, I have, Eddie. It's crazy. If you have any info, I know you send us some stuff. I do look through everybody's emails when I have a chance, and I know that the mods will star certain ones for me. But Eddie, I've seen yours, and yeah, if you guys have any info on that, Jonah Chapin from Spokane. All right, 338. They say so. I just want to go to the point where they say he's fleeing right here. Okay. Sorry, I didn't know this was a full 8-minute video. This is the part that is important. So you hear Murphy start to bark. So just to be clear, this is when they are saying that Brian Koberger is entering the residence, because shortly after the time that the dog starts barking, muffled audio can be heard of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. The PCA had stated that. Then, with this security camera being less than 50 feet from the west wall of Xander Kernodle's bedroom, they're saying that essentially gives credibility to this audio. So this is at 4:17. I want you to think about never being in a house in the dark, 5 cars in the driveway, a 6'2", 230-pound victim being Ethan Chapin, Xana, who's apparently awake and eating DoorDash and is walking around, Dylan on that same second floor, Bethany downstairs, and Kaylee and Maddie together. But apparently one thing they leave out, if you want to say what Dylan said or believe what Dylan said, it's that Kaylee screamed, "There's someone here." So we don't hear ever on this audio somebody yell, "There's someone here," but we can hear a muffled whimper and a loud thud. So this is apparently when the Idaho 4 crime is happening. And that's it. And that produced 68 terabytes of data. And that produced how many interviews with people? That produced only trace DNA on a knife sheath. So that means that 417 Koberger gets into the house. There's a dog barking. That doesn't intimidate him. He's not worried about that waking anybody up. None of the roommates open their door. I mean, you're going to tell me that take whatever order of the victims out. We'll stay with the official story for this example, but you're going to tell me that the dog is barking chaotically and that Dylan, Xana, and Ethan don't hear that? Xana's awake eating DoorDash on TikTok. So if Xana walked up and was in the kitchen and then walked up the stairs and saw it, well, okay, then why does that have to be leaked out through Dateline? And it wasn't Xana's blood on the ping pong table. It was Kaylee's blood that was corrected. So none of them do anything. They were in frozen shock phase, yet there's this talking point of nothing bad ever happens in Moscow. So what were they all worried about? In addition with how fast that is, I mean, we've had an expert on here, as people know. I mean, 4,000 crime scenes investigated, a death, homicide, crime scene investigator, Jeffrey Gentry. He's like, it's impossible. You'd be saturated in blood. Beck said the ones who think he's guilty will just continue to go with the MSM story. They don't have anything else. Discord Dawn says, but was that normal in the house? Maybe. I'm trying to say that even if this was, I agree with you, Dodd, because we don't know what they're used to or what they're acclimated to, but clearly Dylan talked with her boyfriend, Quinn. Quinn had said it's a party house, just relax. So maybe they see people walking around in ski masks all the time and someone screams, someone's here, the dog starts going bananas and you hear a loud bang and you know what I mean? So I think the point that I'm making though is nothing matches this level of violence in the short amount of time. It doesn't seem like it does. I mean, this is 4 minutes. That's in and out. Wouldn't you be like, I don't even know what happened? Laura K said the police admitted that was their car circling the house, being suspect vehicle 1. I remember that report saying that they were on some sort of report and they would go up this way, down that way. And that suspect vehicle 1 could have been the Banfield undercover police car, the silver Ford Fusion hybrid. And it still doesn't explain why, if that was them, they would cover it up. Do you know what I mean? Like none of the reasons for the cover up make sense if they really just got the wrong guy initially. Like this doesn't feel like they're trying to keep a single mistake from being found out. It feels extremely complex and planned as far as what they're covering, why they're covering, because in an honest investigation, if there was a car that was seen circling that looked suspicious, wouldn't you think that through an honest investigation, you would uncover rather quickly of known vehicles in that area that it was your own undercover detail? Because you can see them right across the street on the Banfield right before this. Like that doesn't seem like it would be a mistake that you would go a month without knowing, arrest somebody in Pennsylvania, extradite them, have all of the DNA tested in the meantime, and then not know about that. And that this is one of my favorite interviews also that just is mind-blowing to me.
That we found that would lead us to any specific, even general location as to where the murder weapon or the clothes have been. And we searched. I mean, the FBI, again, to their credit, we had folks doing soil samples and so all sorts of things to try to come up with somewhere to start searching for these things. And we just never found it. As far as the forensics piece, I'll let Darren speak to
Yeah,
that.
and on the weapon, it wasn't a lack of trying. Everywhere that we had evidence of where he went, based upon phone records, based upon the evidence that we had gathered, we searched that. We went there. We did.
So again, I feel like this is very important. He is saying that everywhere that his phone records where we essentially, this is the story. This is now the post-sentencing press conference with the investigators. And obviously Brett Payne wrote the PCA, although it was like a working document and anybody could add stuff, it sounded like. But you have Bill Thompson there on the right, Brett Payne, and I always forget this guy's name. But anyways, he is saying that, yeah, we have been showing everybody that this is the route that Brian Koberger took, and Brett Payne saying we even did soil samples to try to figure out where it was. And he said, this isn't a lack of try. We searched everywhere that we saw his phone and path would be. We didn't find one.
Searches on the ground, in the water. We did searches. We sent soil samples to try to figure out maybe where a shovel had been used. So we searched everywhere that we possibly could. But the reality is we're looking for a singular small, it's not that small, but K-bar knife, and that's it. So it's endless of where it could have been, and we just were not able to find it. So.
What about the clothes and his ability to avoid forensics at the scene, in a murder scene where we now know Kaylee Gonzalez was stabbed 34 times and then another victim was stabbed more than
Right. So the reality is that somebody can carry this out and still not get covered in blood. That's the reality of it. And this does happen. And there's plenty of studies of that. And we've had some of the world's experts that we've asked those same questions because we've struggled with that. Of why do we not find more here and there? And the reality was, if somebody has the training, if somebody has thought about it, if somebody wears the right type of clothing, that could be the outcome. And that's what we were left with.
Over here.
Gene Soros of CNN, Mr. Thompson, did you do psychological testing on Brian Koberger? Did that weigh into your decision to have a plea deal? And stabbings, multiple stabbings are very personal. How did you assess that mode of murder?
I can tell you that psychological testing.
So you guys just heard what he said too, right here.
34 times.
She's asking him, how is it possible there's not more blood? And he goes on to say, well, the reality is this. He's like, we've had top experts in the world. They're saying that it's all possible. Okay, well then let's look at a top expert. He's like one of 62, or maybe he's like one of something only in the world from his research that has all of these degrees and all of these certifications. Let's listen to what he says. You look at the crime scene photos and you have to ask yourself, how the hell did anybody think they were just unconscious and they're not waking up?
So my initial reaction is, why in the heck are they not saying that there's blood everywhere and these people are dead? You know, they have obvious injuries. There's no mystery that they have been brutally murdered. You've got a knife sheath there, you've got blood everywhere, you have very traumatic injuries. And not one person mentioned there is blood or that these people are dead. You know, if it was me that found these people, I want the police investigators or the dispatcher to know as much as possible. I'd say, there's 4 dead bodies, there's blood everywhere, they are dead. You need to send ambulances and help immediately. That way, the dispatcher at least knows what resource to send. Right now, these police are going into a situation, not having a clue what happened.
And then this part
it might be in there.
This might be one of the.
Hang on, let me scroll. We have been. Come on.
I think
it's coming.
I became. If this
went to prison. I have a theory. My theory is.
Sorry, I thought that was going to be quicker. But then you have Jeffrey Gentry say the following. This is the one I was looking for. Sorry.
There was a Lee Harvey Oswald.
What the fuck?
Sincerely, just.
It's very simple. You have.
I'm telling. there was a
I hate when YouTube does this, Hive. I'm so sorry. Why are the shorts and all of this so stupid whenever I try to show it? It's not that hard. This is one of the most telling things, too, that he says.
Absolutely no way that somebody would inflict the injuries that they did on Maddie and Kaylee up in that room and not have blood on their clothing.
So we have 7 different transfer stains on the stairs going from the 3rd down to the 1st floor. There are 7 different transfer stains. There are no drip stains from the 3rd to the 2nd floor. How does the perp have that much blood and not leave a single drip between the rooms?
Like blood dripping off of them?
Yeah.
It's just impossible.
I mean, so it's like there's that, and then again, listen to how that was answered compared to, well, the reality is this. I can't stand that language. Hey, I'm telling you, you guys just don't know. The reality is this. No, I do know, bro. I do know that if you were to just stab one person 34 times in that quick of a manner, even if there was nobody else murdered in 4 minutes and you stab one person 34 times, blood's flying all over the walls in all different directions, and it just misses him. He's apparently leaning over Maddie as she sleeps.
It was pretty surface level. And then when we tried to get into things a bit more detail, he decided to end the interview. So that's pretty much
as soon as we tried to walk into the purpose of why we're there, which obviously he knows we're detectives from Idaho. So that's when we really started to shut down, and then he just shut it down. So we
calm, relaxed,
say very similar to what you see and whenever you see him in court.
Okay, next question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mike Baker with the New York Times. I'm wondering if you talk about Mr. Koberger's family, whether you got much cooperation, tips, input from them along the way.
The only thing I'm really able to talk about is that we didn't get any tips or any evidentiary items from the family. So, anything to add to that?
No.
Yes.
Just wondering if you ever had the idea of what made Mr. Koberger take the plea deal in the end.
No. That was a short answer. You probably have time for a short follow-up.
Can I also ask a follow-up to investigators? I know there was some reports that there was a pirates food container out of the house. Did you ever determine what that was?
No, and the belief was in the one surviving roommates in her statement, and that's out there, was that she observed something in his hand when she saw him, but we don't know what it was.
They don't know anything.
You had an expert who was going to testify about cleaning something off of his work computer. He is some software experts. Was there any evidence that he had tried to wipe anything from his phone?
So this is a good point. Okay. I saw somebody say that we should have a document of all the red flags. I feel like what would be really effective too is if you take a mainstream thing like a Dateline or an Amazon or a Netflix, because in Netflix, they tried to say that Brian Koberger, who again, criminology and the studies of how experts think, or I'm sorry, how criminals think, that's been demonized and weaponized. But same thing in Netflix, the most recent one, they just said Koberger wiped everything. He was very good about a digital footprint. And they make it sound so nefarious. There are a lot of people that will use a VPN, that will clear their devices, that don't want a digital footprint, don't want to be tracked. And listen to what they say in response to that question about, so Brian Koberger wiped all of his devices. Were you able to get anything? Because there was an expert that was going to testify in court saying that, he was wiping his devices. Listen to this response. It's one of my favorite responses.
Software-wise, the bar person.
Yeah, and so this kind of goes into the connection to the victims as well. That's a similar question. We had the world's foremost experts on this look into it, and there was evidence that he had used software to wipe many of his devices relatively effectively. So there wasn't much evidence obtained after that.
Including Including, I think he had two, did he have two cell phones, or was it just the one cell phone?
I think he had one active phone, but I don't remember, so don't quote me if he had more at his home or office or somewhere else.
Computer that he had wiped.
Yeah, he regularly used software to try to wipe, clear things off. He used VPN.
Hey, Ed, I didn't realize this the first time. Does their reaction seem a little bit strange when they ask about two cell phones? I don't know how I missed that the first time that or the handful of times that I watched this. When she says, does he have two phones? Look at their reactions. He's like, well, one active phone. Okay, so what he's trying to answer that in a way is for us to just assume that maybe he's got an old model of an iPhone in his dresser drawer that he forgot about that they took. No, but if you are somebody who is, okay, and I know this because I have a family member who is in the DEA. He has two phones for work. One of them, which he uses to communicate with all of his confidential informants to go do controlled buys. Okay, so I would guess that that's probably the same thing. You're not going to give anybody that you're working with, if you're either an informant or somehow connected to something that's going on, you're not going to give out your personal number. Like, even at my day job, we have work phones. I have two separate phones. You keep work and personal separate. So look at the way I would say that. Yeah, I mean, I have one active phone that I use for browsing and for my YouTube and, you know, any other apps, texting. But then I have my work phone, which is like, yeah, you're going to find all my work emails and stuff like that. But look at their body language. Type a 1 in the chat if you picked up on that too just now. That might be a good angle to look into.
Including, I think he had two, did he have two cell phones, or was it just the one cell phone?
I think he had one active phone, but I don't remember, so don't quote me if he.
Oh, Jesus.
Including, I think he had two, did he have two cell phones, or was it just the one cell phone?
Oh my God. Look at this death glare from Bill Thompson. That's like, you better answer this properly. Watch how fast Bill Thompson's head snaps over to these guys.
Including, I think he had two, did he have two cell phones, or was it just the one cell phone?
I think he had one active phone, but I don't remember, so don't quote me if he had more at his home or office or somewhere else.
Computer that he had wiped.
Yeah, he regularly used software to try to wipe, clear things off. He used VPN on his devices also.
Okay, back here.
That's what I'm thinking, Charmed. If Brian Koberger had that assistantship, if he had a second phone and worked for Pullman PD in some fashion or another, all three of them. Yeah, that's such a great question. Honest question, Danger Zone. Do people watch these three and just think to themselves, ah, yes, just some honest gents telling the truth?
Evan Fixer with the United States. I'm hoping you can walk us through the decision to hand off the DNA process on the knife sheet over to Offer Labs, who's contracted by ISP, and then ultimately the FBI takes over that IGG process. And then Prosecutor Thompson, I'm curious if you had concerns about constitutional rights issues based on how the FBI conducted themselves in that part.
So I know it's kind of hard to hear, so I'll just repeat the question. This reporter is asking about the IGG process and if Prosecutor Bill Thompson has any constitutional rights concerns.
I'll start, and I'll just speak briefly to, when we were notified that we had a DNA from the knife sheath, and it was a single source male DNA, touch DNA, then we knew that we had capabilities to take that further. So you're correct, the Idaho State Police has a contract with Othram Laboratories in Texas. So we flew that over there, and they started the process of working that and what was the beginning of the IGG process. And at some point during it, we were working with the FBI, which we did closely throughout the entire case and every aspect of it. We talked and met with them, and they had further resources and some capabilities that we thought may get us somewhere quicker. And so we made the decision to then shift that to the FBI and continue that process there.
Which they don't ever show their work or their notes on. Let me just be clear. Ann Taylor is on the record saying, we don't know what happened. It's a giant secret. Okay, that is heard. You can hear her say that. It is on the record, which I think is a massive, massive deal.
And as to your question about legal concerns, my simple answer is no.
Jesus Christ, Bill. Shame. I have no legal concerns that you spit into the tube to try to find out family heritage. And you had no idea that maybe your brother did it, maybe your uncle did it, maybe your aunt did it, but you had no idea that across the country, there was going to be 4 people that were murdered in Idaho. And we found a speck of trace DNA on a knife sheath. We are going to use those data labs that's meant to just find your family tree. And now you're going to be looking at 4 life sentences. The FBI has their own guidelines that says that they can't do that. They can't use it as evidence. It needs to be just put as a tip. Like, it can't be used in court. However, they're lobbying tens of millions of dollars a year to be able to use IGG in a court of law. And I wonder if that was why they tried to get this through. The Koberger law. See, we've been lobbying tens of millions of dollars to be able to use IGG as court admissible evidence, and it caught the Idaho 4 serial killer.
I didn't have legal concerns about how the FBI conducted their IGG investigation. I know that was the subject of lengthy, detailed, painfully detailed motions and briefing, and Mr. Nye rose to the occasion and was able to address all of that. But in the end, it's simply no different than sending somebody undercover into any place to gather information. And I was not concerned about the legality of it.
What? Can somebody make sense of that? I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm going to replay that part, but seriously, can somebody in a couple sentences make sense of how Bill Thompson equated using IGG, where the FBI breaks their own rules, with a public database like 23andMe? How is that the same as sending somebody undercover? Like, where does that analogy come from? I'll play it again.
Detailed motions and briefing, and Mr. Nye rose to the occasion and was able to address all of that. But in the end, it's simply no different than sending somebody undercover into any place to gather information. And I was not concerned about the legality of it. And the judge came through and made the right decision that there was no violation of the defendant's rights or anybody else's rights.
Had he not left the knife sheath behind, would you have been able to track him down?
We've talked about this ad nauseum. And the answer is yes. Through the car, most likely. We had some amazing people going truly line by line over tens of thousands of white Hyundai Elantras. So we believe we would have got to it through that avenue. The time frame for that is uncertain. It could have been a week later, could have been 2 months later. We just don't know. We would have found it. We would have found it.
There's a lot of questions in regards to that initial window. Brett and I made the decision on what that window was, even though the experts were saying there may be more years that match it. But the simple numbers that we began to look at were astronomical, of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of these vehicles. So we chose to try to narrow it and start smaller. And then as we had to, we were going to open that up. But we both believe.
Wasn't it done in the opposite way? Wasn't it done in the opposite way that it was? Wasn't it expanded and then taken back, but they just went with the expanded number? As far as the range of the years, he said, no, we kept it smaller, but wasn't it done the opposite way where they went from 2011 to 2013 to 2011 to 2016? So it actually, if I'm hearing that correctly, or what he's trying to say, it sounds like it was actually, no, even though they said, hey, well, whatever. That just is kind of mind blowing. Yeah. Huh.
We would have gotten him through the car eventually.
A question for Mr. Thompson. Amanda Rowling with Current 2. It appears that the plea deal, it felt a bit rushed. So the question is, why did it happen so quickly, considering some of the families were against it? And also, the Mogan family, at the plea hearing, mentioned saying that this is the best possible outcome. I'm just wondering, do you agree with that, or would you like to see a different outcome?
Well, I think we agree with the Mogan family. Our decision was that this is the best possible outcome, all things considered, and factoring into that the defendant was prepared to plead guilty as charged. Now, if that hadn't been a factor, we'd be picking a jury for trial starting right now.
Nobody believes you, Bill. Nobody believes that. It's the best possible outcome because of what you just said you'd be doing never happened.
Or starting this week. What was the first part?
Why was this such a quick, it felt rushed, so why did this happen so quickly to the family?
No, I hear you. The process moved quickly. There was no doubt about it. And like I outlined for the court earlier today, things changed dynamically the week following the June 18th hearings on the defense motion for a continuance and the alternate perpetrator motion, where Judge Hippler made it very clear that the defense was not going to prevail on either of those. And so the reality of trial was there, and there was nothing else in its way. We were continuing for trial. We had been doing that for months. And as I mentioned, that's you're bringing Mr. Hurwitz in to help us because the Attorney General's office was not able with the manpower to help us all the way through trial.
One of the other things too, that makes no sense. I don't think it makes sense. If you got a guy so dead to rights, why are they acting as if Brian Kohberger offered them a plea deal? I mean, sometimes plea deals, they're not even put on the table by the prosecutor because they know that their case is so airtight. And they've made this case sound airtight. And that's what I want to know too. What really happened after June 18th? And Sherlock, I already know that you know what I'm going to say, so I'll give you a chance to type it in there. Because there was a massive news story that broke out right around then. Does anybody remember what that could be? Where this certainly did feel rushed and something changed? Because I do. And I remember a sealed sheriff's warrant that was returned. And a forest fire that was started to lure in police and firefighters. Right after that, and it's alleged that it's alleged that there was a witness that was going to testify on behalf of Brian Kohberger that was somehow involved in that. Yeah, even people in the area raise an eyebrow to that.
We were ready to go. When we were approached by the defense about the possibility of a plea, our first question was, is your client prepared to plead guilty? And it took them a little while to give us that answer. In the meantime, we reached out to the families and we talked to the families and we solicited their input. And we considered that in making our decision. The fact of the matter is, and I think Judge Hippler commented on this back on July 2nd when we were in court, is that the logistics of the upcoming trial with 10,000 prospective jurors being summoned in, the court staff making arrangements and preparing to process that part of the case dictated that if the case was going to resolve, it needed to resolve quickly. And so that kind of drove the pace over that weekend, the last weekend of June. At the end of the weekend, when we understood from the defense that the defendant was prepared to plead guilty, the court was notified the next morning, and the court wanted to move quickly to get a plea done on the record if it was going to be done, and if it wasn't, so we were not interrupted in our trial preparations.
The trial logistics were the main concern, just as Judge Schiffler had said prior, right? With the jury as a factor.
Yeah, the practical aspect is that the trial machine was running, and if it was going to be interrupted, that had to be known as soon as possible. I think that's the fairest explanation.
Okay, question here.
What does that mean?
I just had a question about looking into Koberger's past. Is there any early signs of trouble, or what did his background look like?
Well, we can't go into his younger years. I believe that's actually still under seal. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what I can tell you is the things we do know about him was that his education led him down a path that was very much focused on forensics, crime scenes, that sort of thing. So that was really what we focused on in his background, is what led him down this path. How may he have prepared for this? And I think that was a big component of that, was just his schooling and his choice of potential future profession. So,
and just so there's no speculation here by what Detective Payne just said, documents under seal involving Mr. Koberger's background, they may or may not be released down the road. I can tell you that there is no evidence of any criminal history of any significant nature. There was no evidence of a history of violence. There was no evidence of a history of a factual predisposition to do the crimes that he committed here. So if there are any concerns.
I mean, dude. There's no evidence of any suspicion that he was whatever the word was that he used to commit these crimes. Why would Brian Koberger's younger years, especially given the fact that they want to say that he's a serial killer, everybody looks at serial killers' childhood. What went wrong? What turned them into this serial killer that fantasizes about murdering people? What went wrong? No, they sealed it. So if they seal everything about his younger years, does that mean that they scrub it all off the internet too? I mean, seriously, if you want to look at a perfect public-facing patsy, it's Brian Koberger. They were able to get his younger years scrubbed off the internet. They're under seal, and the guy regularly wipes all of his devices. And he looks different in every picture too, by the way. TikTok will label, if you upload a 16:9 ratio of every screenshot the mainstream media has ever used of Brian Koberger, TikTok will label it AI generated, which is just hilarious. Unbelievable.
Concerns among your listeners or readers that somehow he was a serial killer in waiting with all of these prior actions. We are not aware of any behaviors like that that preceded what happened here in Idaho.
We'll take this question here, and then we're gonna have two more after that to finish up.
That clip needs somebody clip that. Everybody needs to clip that and just put that 4-second clip on TikTok with all of the people on any documentary saying Brian Koberger's a serial killer. You have Bill Thompson.
Any behaviors like that that preceded what happened here in Idaho.
We'll take this question here, and then we're gonna have two more after that to finish up.
Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, you talked about meeting with the families before the plea deal was reached, including the Gonzalez's. Have you spoken with the Gonzalez's afterward about their displeasure with this? And if so, what is that conversation then?
We have spoken with families afterwards, and I can tell you that families that did not agree with our decision have made that very clear to us, and I don't expect anything different. I respect, and we respect, that everyone is going to grieve differently, even within family units, and everyone is going to look at the case and possible resolutions from their own light, and they are entitled to that as victims. I'm not going to pretend that everybody was just fine with our decision, because there were families and family members who were not. And we accept that. We recognize that. It's just a fact of life.
2 more questions. We haven't called on you yet.
It was stated earlier that the target is unknown. However, it's been speculated that the convicted may have encountered Maddie while she was serving at the Maddie restaurant due to the vegan menu options. When the digital data was analyzed, were there any location pins or any information there that could have connected him to where Maddie worked?
No, there wasn't. Like I said earlier, we wanted that. We looked for it in every possible way, digitally, financially, physical location, anything you could think of, anything that we thought, where is the connection? Where's the overlap? And we searched tirelessly and never found it. I can't say that he was never there at all, but we never found any evidence at all from interviewing everybody that we possibly could, talking to every person that would have that information to be able to show that he was there or that there was a connection through the restaurant.
Okay, last question here.
Okay, just 2 follow-ups to earlier questions, if that's okay, so I can make sure we're understanding everybody correctly. First of all, Mike's question about the family. You said that you didn't get any evidence from the family. Was there any hindrance of the investigation from the family? And was there any specific evidence you were hoping to get?
Are you talking about his family, Koberger's? Yes. There was not any hindrance, anything, nothing that impacted us carrying out the investigation.
Okay, thank you. And then the second follow-up, when you mentioned, like, obviously he followed this line of interest in his studies, did anything in your investigation indicate that that was chosen as part of a planning process as opposed to just an area of interest?
There was nothing aside from, we have some of his coursework where he did, a crime scene recreation, that sort of thing, but it was all part of his studies. So I don't think that any of us attributed that to a planning process.
That's a little bit strange. I'm just going to go throw this out there. Let me throw my tinfoil hat on. That out of all of the things that the criminology books that we've seen, the survey they made a huge deal out of, Brett Payne starts with crime scene recreation. Does that stick out to anybody? I'm not sure. It's okay to wear a tinfoil hat every now and again, especially when we have people that were medical professionals that would investigate crime scenes and say, this doesn't make any sense. It's absolutely impossible that there wouldn't be any blood that's tracked to them. It wouldn't be tracked outside. It wouldn't be tracked to their car. And, they even actually tell us in a way that these bodies were staged. We have somebody say that's not enough blood. Think about how much blood is in every body. Look at the floor of Xana's room. Oh my God. Brian Koberger. He's doing crime scene reconstruction. Unbelievable. Let's just listen to that again. Why say that, Brett Payne?
As opposed to just an area of interest?
There was nothing aside from, we have some of his coursework where he did, a crime scene recreation, that sort of thing, but it was all part of his studies. So I don't think that any of us attributed that to a planning process per se. Certainly was a learning process, but whether or not it was a planning process ahead of what he did, we'll probably never know that.
Yeah, and I would say we didn't find anything that would be any different than a student similar, a different student in the PhD program.
So then I'm understanding that the planning process, that your investigation turned out, if it was part of the plan, was the purchase of the Gaylord knife on Amazon would have been the first, step toward.
Yeah.
Did he plan it? Did he buy it with the purpose of that? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
And we don't
have
know.
anything to show or prove that he did that.
Jesus Christ.
Well, thank you all. That concludes.
Guys, seriously, every single person that thinks Brian Koberger is so guilty, you should go and watch this. If anybody wants to send this to their friends or family, screenshot this. Here is the title of the video. Police and prosecutors hold press conference after the Koberger sentencing to discuss the investigation. It's on KTVB. So they have nothing. It's not just Birdie and the Hive and other crazy wacko conspiracy theorists that are saying, let the families grieve and this and that. No, dude, like, listen, Bill Thompson himself is saying, we don't know why they're calling him a serial killer. He was never at the Mad Greek. His studies were no different than any other PhD student. We don't know if he bought the K-Bar with the intention to murder them. He has no connection to the victims, no motive. We looked on the phone path and the phone pings that they submitted in the court records. We even did soil samples on the shovel to try to figure out where it came from. We can't find it. Well, what about him wiping his devices? Well, his younger years are under seal, and he would regularly wipe his devices. So what do you have? Oh, we have his DNA on the knife sheath. Oh, again, that goes back to the knife that you can't prove that that's the reason why he bought it. And it went from the ISP, flown down to Texas to Othram, then to the FBI, and nobody knows what happened in between all of there. There's footage, security footage that's taken with a potato trying to film Bigfoot. It's like every Bigfoot video ever. Audio is all mismatched. Yep, case closed. So obvious. So again, here it is if anybody wants to screenshot it. And now what I'd like to do is, after watching all of that, okay, so here are my notes. I figured it'd be easier just to put them up on the screen. And if we're going to follow their logic, okay, if one man did this alone in 4 minutes, as we watched the Idaho Statesman show us with the thud and the barking starting, then the only remaining explanation for an 8-hour delay is that Dylan and Bethany somehow, quote, helped by not calling the police while the bodies were going into rigor mortis. And the logical endpoint of the state's own timeline being 420, which is obviously absurd, everybody. If Brian had no connection to them, why would they just randomly be in frozen shock phase, hiding in the room, yet they're sending Snapchats? They're walking all over the place where their Apple Watch tracks them. Somebody's maybe letting the dog back inside. They're calling people. They're on Instagram. They're on Indeed. So that's an absurd point, that the roommates would do a cleanup because they're in contact with Brian Koberger or no Brian Koberger. Otherwise, how do you explain no blood? And not only no blood, everybody, they don't talk about anything outside of the rooms either. They don't test anything outside of the rooms. And when they did test the beer pong table, they got it wrong because the placards needed to have 7 added to them. And so if you looked at the photos and the placards, the record was wrong and it was off by 7. You had to adjust them down so that they were the same. The expert didn't even figure that out until later. So the surviving roommates did not help a stranger. At the end of the day, their timeline is broken. Their timeline is absurd. The delay is absurd, but it should be explainable. The cleanup should be explainable. And again, that's why I'm trying to say that if Brian leaves in 4 minutes and the only other 2 people in that house were Dylan and Bethany, and yet they say there's a cleanup and there's a latent print, well, that would mean that they cleaned it up if nobody else went over there. That's absurd. That's absurd. So instead, what they do is whoever did clean it up, they ignored all the spots that they missed. That's what they did. You guys realize that that's why they're not testing certain things out in the living room? They are ignoring the parts of the cleanup that were missed. Okay, this one I'll just share because this one's this one's pretty interesting if we look at this. So the state okay, so here's the official claim. Brian Koberger alone entered the house, committed 4 murders in under 4 minutes, was briefly seen by Dylan, and fled. No cleanup, no staging, no second person, just one guy who somehow left 0 DNA transfer in his car and 0 usable evidence except 1 speck on a sheath. Here is the massive math problem. If the killer was gone by 4:20 and the survivors waited until almost noon, what exactly were they doing for 8 hours while 2 of their roommates and a boyfriend, 3 of their roommates, I mistyped that, and a boyfriend were dead in pools of blood just feet away? Just for them to call for an unconscious, passed out, drunk roommate. Okay, so let's just go through this. Here are what they're saying had to have happened, everybody. You have to kill 2 women in one bed without either fully fighting. You have to stage the body after blood dries, potentially, because it didn't get on you. You have to move downstairs, confront Xana, neutralize a 230-pound athlete who never leaves the bed, create diluted blood trails across common areas, clean those same areas, cover Ethan with a blanket, and leave a staged sheath while exiting without without transferring any victim DNA into your car. Although the evidence shows that there were signature wounds on both the third floor victims, suggesting more than one person, one hand used when you have to lean over and maybe brace yourself to prevent yourself from touching the other person, right? That's how they depict it. Brian Koberger's leaning over the bed, over Maddie to get to Kaylee. Ethan's hair in the fist and his blood at the stairwell, again, in a bed that he never left. Dilution under objects, being the White Claw box, that would require post-murder time to do that. The first floor bathroom is sterilized and emptied. There's no DNA of any victim found in his car or apartment, and the survivors wait 8 hours. So here are the questions that I want everybody to start asking people and have them answer this out loud if they know about the case. Why was the only hair recovered from a murdered man's closed fist never DNA tested? How does blood become diluted under a White Claw box that is still sitting on top of it? If Brian Koberger or just one person left at 4:20, what were the survivors doing for the next 8 hours? Why accept a plea deal with 0 allocution, when the physical evidence contains this many contradictions? Why does the chain of custody form for the only DNA item look like it was written by one person days later? And how does a 230-pound athlete leave blood at a stairwell he never reached while his girlfriend is murdered 3 feet away from him? They must have known each other. They must have worked together if that's the case, right? No, it's absurd. It's absurd. Times a million. And let me just refresh everybody's memory again who might not be aware of this. None of this blood is explained. So, but yet it's all diluted with an unknown substance. Isn't it interesting that the only ones that they label are the victims? Let's even just take out the unknown male. Okay, even if you take out the unknown male B that they, for whatever reason, didn't test, Nobody's going to question if Brian Koberger had gone out the back sliding door, or if these murders only occurred in the victims' rooms. How does that happen? And if Brian had just come from down the stairs, how does only Kaylee's blood get on the ping pong table? And then over on the stairs, there's a mix of Major Kaylee, Minor Maddie, Major Kaylee, Minor Maddie. How does Ethan's blood get out over here? And then it goes to saying this: who is unknown male B? There's no way. Also, these cups to be in a perfectly set triangle. Where did that go? There you go. Hive Mind Mermaid. And the other ones to be chaotically spread. I'm sorry, guys. If you bump empty solo cups, and I've never heard of people gluing down beer pong cups. The whole point of beer pong is you make it into the cup and you pick it up and you move it to the side. So I don't believe that these are taped down. I don't believe that these are glued down. None of that. If you bump that table, which is a wobbly table, you ever been at a tailgate and you've just like accidentally hit your thigh or your hip on one of those things? Everything rocks, everything spills. And those are just filled with like a 1/4 inch of water. The other side's all over the living room, but those are perfectly set. Again, nobody wants to explain this. And it's just ridiculous that there's a knife on the table. Like, if nothing else, Hunter Johnson, after 8 hours, has a knife and is behind a police officer walking into a quadruple homicide. And Hunter Johnson is not detained. Hunter Johnson is not threatened. Hunter Johnson does not have a weapon pulled on him. I don't know anybody that can get a police officer's back with a steak knife when there's 4 other people stabbed to death, laying in a pool of blood, and be right behind them, so close to the cop. Hunter's probably breathing on him. And he just gets to pick it up with his bare hand and put it on a damn beer pong table. Switch back stairs. Here's some stains. Again, nobody wants to talk about any of the movement from room to room. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. You'd be shot for that. Like, there are people that would get shot for having a knife and walking with a knife behind a cop, and the cop sees people that are dead, and then they go, oh my God, we haven't even cleared the house yet. Then they clear it. Now, I will give the cop a little bit of grace. Officer Nunez believes that he's walking into a drunk, passed out, college-aged female. Why? Because after 8 hours, and clearly people knowing what's going on, knowing that people are stabbed to death, knowing they're murdered in the minimum, hearing everything, they decided to call the police and not arm those police with the correct resources. No, he's walking in with an AED in his hand. That's what he's doing, because he's under the assumption that it's a drunk, passed out roommate. What does that officer get instead behind him? He gets somebody who's got a steak knife in a small hallway. The officer can't escape if Hunter really wanted to. Logistically, it's a nightmare for a police officer, I'm sure, if that person, like, if you wanted to really go out there and theoretically talk about situational awareness, if Dylan and Hunter were dating, and this is just a working thought exercise, but let's say Dylan and Hunter were dating and they killed their friends. All hypothetical. I'm proving a point here. And Dylan called the police officers because they wanted to lure in a police officer, similar to how the wildfire was started in Coeur d'Alene I believe it was Coeur d'Alene. And people started shooting at the fire department as they showed up to the wildfire. But if Dylan and Hunter were somehow scheming together because they wanted to take out a cop, Dylan calls and says it's just a drunk, passed out college-age girl. Hunter stands there acting all shocked, and Hunter has a knife behind the police officer in a 3-foot hallway, that 3-foot wide hallway. You guys realize that is so, that's so plausible of it could have happened. Like that could have happened. There are 7 different transfer stains on the stairs between the 3rd and the 1st floor, but there's no drip stains from the 3rd to the 2nd floor. And there's a ton of blood on this half wall and living room area. Maddie's blood on the stairs, Kaylee's on the ping pong table or the beer pong table, and then a mix of them on the wall going down. On November 21st, 2022, Idaho State Police Sergeant Darren Gilbertson conducted timed runs through the residence at 1122 King Road. Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan were murdered there during the morning hours of November 13th. Brian Koberger was subsequently arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. The purpose of the timed runs was to gain an understanding of the approximate time needed to carry out the murders. They did a fast run, and it was like a minute and a half. And then they did a slow run, and it was 2 minutes and 20 seconds or something ridiculous. Just to make sure people understand how stupid that is, that means that you have 90 seconds to enter the house with a dog barking, 5 people inside of that house in the dark. You've never been inside of it. And in 90 seconds, you are able to travel up 2 flights of switchback stairs, down 2 flights of switchback stairs, and your arm is moving at a rate of 2 stabs per second, or just under, maybe like 1.65 stabs per second, to have 150 stab wounds in 90 seconds. Then you don't have blood on you, yet the crime scene's cleaned up with an unknown diluted liquid, or the blood is diluted with an unknown liquid, and you have nothing in your car or on you. They don't find your murder weapon. They don't know your motive. Nothing. That is not a conspiracy. That's a horseshit investigation. That's what it is. It's horseshit. It's so bad that the fact anybody believes it is concerning for for everybody else's safety. Your instinct is terrible if you believe the official narrative. And again, it's like, but how is it possible that so many people are just rocked to sleep on the mainstream media? I don't know. I mean, back in the day in World War II, you had people calling their neighbors so that others, or people calling the cops and telling other neighbors so they got sent to concentration camps. Well, that would never happen today. Oh, really? Well, now they have you walking 3 feet or 6 feet apart in a damn grocery store, buying all the toilet paper that you can. Stay inside, wear a mask, do this, do that. And so it's like, people follow the rules. They had hotlines to call in and tell on people that were not following COVID mandates. So it's like, there are a good amount of people out there, everybody, that will, when the government tells them how high to jump, or to tell them to jump, they go, how high? And it happens over and over and over and over again. And we always are sitting there like scratching our heads. How do we get into that situation? It's because we're surrounded by a bunch of dumbasses that can't think for themselves, and a bunch of people that really believe that 4 people can be stabbed to death with over 150 stab wounds from anywhere from 90 seconds to 2 minutes and some change in a house they never knew, with 2 people that are awake, a 6'3" man, clean it up, get to their car, drive away, not be found for 30 days, even though your car is all over the world news. You somehow get pulled over twice with your father traveling back home to Pennsylvania. They do a SWAT raid in your house. It's not chaotic. You don't deny anything. You're confused. They then take apparently the world's dirtiest Q-tip. I mean, holy hell, if anybody saw that on Netflix, they definitely wanted to make it seem like Koberger's earwax was out of control, or his father's earwax was out of control. But they test this Q-tip that has no chain of custody on it. It's super secretive. It goes to Othram. And Brian Koberger has the most, what seems to be, cohesive, pre-planned media tour. This guy's a loner, incel, creep, wannabe serial killer play out, and it hasn't changed 4 years later. People want it to be Brian Koberger so badly. They want it. People want it to be Brian Koberger so badly that they would rather have Brian Koberger in prison just because he looks creepy, or in their mind, the news has told them that he's this weirdo so often that they believe it, that he should just be in prison anyways. Get the firing squad while the real killers are out there. And all of this was done with no trial. The crime scene's gone. For whatever reason, national security was referenced and everything was redacted. You can't see what Brian Koberger's childhood history was. There's no digital footprint on him. He's constantly wiping his devices. He goes to a school that has a ton of suspect funding. But God forbid you ask a couple of questions. Oh, quite a crazy world we live in, huh? We're the conspiracy theorists. Hive, thank you all so much for tuning in. I know this is a little bit earlier, but I will be back on normally, or at our normal scheduled time, 7 p.m. Central tomorrow night. We are doing a call-in show. I am so excited for that. It's very easy to call in. You will not be on camera. There's a link that will be pinned in the live chat. So I look forward to hearing from you all, and I will see you then. Cheers, everybody. Actually, I forgot super chats. Damn, how did I do that all the time? Sorry, guys. I tried not to. Sammy, thank you for being a member for Hive Plus for 3 months. Hey, early birdie, interesting interview with Brian Enton, Cy Ray, and the G's. It's giving intentional dialogue and BS. Steve said he was told to lie, and he did. Yes. It's almost like this reverse psychology of like, we're so upset just to keep added pressure onto the case. Keep eyes on it. Thank you, Kyler and Carrie, for the jewels. Pineapple Diana said, did you see Steve G alluded to the other BK? Not a plus for us, but the interviewer was from America, 24 hours. He stopped him somewhere outside for questions. I actually don't think that I have. Can you email me that, Diana, please? Pieces of April said, episode 2, 35 minutes and 15 seconds. Is it Kaylee? What does that mean? Yeah, my bad. Kiss me, Rappy. What does that mean? Is it Kaylee? Like, is she walking around? Do you see Kaylee? Huh. Appreciate that, Tim Smith. Pretty much my tits redacted for the jewels, the coins. Pop and Switch said, I already read this one. Thank you again, Pop and Switch. Baby Cakes, I already said welcome. And that is all of them. Ninny Jones said the crash out is needed. For whatever reason, all of my crash outs seem to happen midday whenever they do occur, or more times than not. But yes, super excited for the call in tomorrow. Thanks you guys for tuning in. Please hit like, please hit subscribe, and I will see you then. Cheers.